It's a Thursday night, the kind of restaurant with low amber lighting and white linen that still smells faintly of red wine and old wood. Your son insisted on bringing everyone together. Grandkids at one end of the table, your daughter-in-law across from you, two men from her side of the family you've only met twice. You're mid-sentence. What I'm saying is, if you restructure the debt before the quarter closes, and she cuts in. No, that's not how it works anymore. Her tone isn't loud. It isn't aggressive. It's casual. Dismissive in a way that passes for modern confidence. A fork pauses halfway to a mouth. Someone clears their throat. Your son shifts in his seat. One of the other men smirks. Barely. You catch it. You feel it first in your chest. A tightening, not rage, not yet. A subtle compression. Your shoulders square slightly. You adjust your cuff. Your jaw moves once. You look at her. She doesn't look away. You inhale slowly through your nose. The room is quiet for a second too long. You could explain, you could correct her, you could lean forward, lower your voice, and re-establish your footing. Everyone is watching. You feel the old instinct rising, the need to clarify, to defend your credibility, to make sure no one walks away with the wrong impression. You open your mouth, then you close it. You reach for your glass instead. And in that 3-second pause, something invisible shifts. There's something most men miss in this moment. Most men over 60 have earned their authority the hard way, through decades of work, through decisions that cost sleep, through mistakes they corrected privately, through responsibilities they never announced. Authority for men of your generation wasn't granted, it was built, which is precisely why interruption feels personal. When someone corrects you publicly, especially someone younger, the reaction isn't about the content. It's about status, about perceived displacement. The ego doesn't say, she disagreed. It says, you've been downgraded. There's an ancient wiring at play. In every social group, hierarchy organizes stability. And when a man who once led rooms now feels challenged at his own family table, the nervous system interprets it as loss. The body prepares to restore order. Voice firms, posture stiffens, explanation begins. Explanation is not neutral. It is often an attempt to reclaim territory. You don't think, I need validation. You think, I need accuracy. But beneath accuracy sits something quieter, the need to ensure others still see you as competent. The paradox is this: the more you explain to preserve status, the more you signal that your status is unstable. Men in their 30s argue because they are building authority. Men in their 40s argue because they are defending authority. By 60, the men who still argue in every minor challenge are revealing something they don't intend to. Strength at this stage is not volume, it's containment. But containment isn't suppression, it's choice. And here's where most men lose calibration. They believe walking away without explanation is weakness, that silence equals surrender. In some situations, it might. But in many others, it is dominance refined into composure. The ability to absorb a minor social disruption without scrambling to restore image. That is psychological surplus. Men who lack that surplus cannot tolerate ambiguity about how they are perceived. They rush to correct, they over-clarify, they narrate their own relevance, and in doing so they give their power away. Walking away without explanation isn't about indifference, it's about internal security that does not require immediate external agreement. But this principle, if misunderstood, can become something else entirely, which brings us to the edge of nuance. There are men who mistake withdrawal for strength. They say nothing, not because they are composed, but because they are avoiding discomfort. They exit conversations to escape exposure. They refuse explanation when explanation is actually owed. That is not power. That is retreat. Consider the business partner who challenges a financial decision in front of the board. If you walk away there without clarifying risk projections, that is not stoicism. That is negligence. Or consider a spouse who expresses hurt about a pattern of behavior. Silence there is not authority, it is avoidance. Walking away is only strong when the explanation would serve ego, not principle. If the explanation serves clarity, responsibility, or protection of others, then withholding it is not maturity. The distinction is subtle but critical. Ask, am I explaining to protect truth or to protect image? At 60, Your image should already be resilient. But truth still matters. There are moments when you must speak precisely, calmly, and directly. Strength is not measured by how little you say. It is measured by whether your words are necessary. The problem many men face is overestimating the necessity of their defense. Not every challenge is a referendum on your competence. Sometimes it is simply generational difference. Sometimes it is ego from the other side. Sometimes it is immaturity testing boundaries. If you engage every minor correction as a battle, you will live in perpetual friction, and friction sustained long enough erodes dignity. The highest form of authority in later years is not reactive. It is selective, which means walking away must be strategic, not habitual. So how do you know when to let the moment pass? You learn to read the terrain. Return to the restaurant. When she interrupted you, what was truly at stake? Was it a financial decision? No. Was it a misrepresentation of something critical? No, it was a conversational correction. Low stakes, public setting, family environment. In that scenario, explaining would not have elevated the room. It would have narrowed it. When you reached for your glass instead of your rebuttal, you did three things simultaneously. First, you signaled emotional regulation. Second, you refused to compete for dominance in a space that did not require it. Third, you shifted the burden of tension back to the interrupter. Silence in that moment forces awareness, not confrontation, awareness. People notice who stays steady. They also notice who overreaches. The smirk you saw, it fades when you don't react. The subtle tension dissipates because you did not escalate it. Strategic withdrawal is not passive. It is an assessment. Ask yourself three quiet questions in real time. 1. Is this challenge material? 2. Is this the right arena? 3. Is my response serving long-term authority or short-term ego? If the answer to the first two is no, restraint increases your stature. Men who must correct every minor misalignment appear brittle. Men who choose their ground appear composed. This is particularly relevant after 60 because your authority no longer comes from upward mobility. It comes from gravitational presence. You are no longer proving, you are stabilizing. In corporate settings, this might mean letting a younger executive take partial credit in a meeting because the long arc of your influence is already established. In family settings, it might mean allowing your adult children to experiment with decisions you would not make unless those decisions cause harm. In social environments, it means recognizing that some disagreements are invitations to ego contests. And you do not need to accept every invitation. Walking away without explanation becomes powerful when it is a conscious preservation of energy. Energy at 60 is valuable, not scarce, but intentional. Every argument you avoid frees bandwidth for something larger. Legacy does not expand through minor victories. It expands through sustained composure. And this is where the shift becomes identity level. Because what you tolerate and what you refuse to engage shapes how others experience your presence over time. Weeks after that dinner, something subtle happens. Your daughter-in-law references something you said previously. Not defensively, not dismissively, curiously. Actually, I've been thinking about what you mentioned regarding restructuring before the quarter. No announcement, no apology, just acknowledgement. That's how influence works when it's not forced. When you didn't explain yourself that night, you allowed the room to recalibrate on its own. You didn't shrink, you didn't react, you simply held your frame. At this stage of life, your authority should feel less like assertion and more like gravity. People lean into gravity, they do not argue with it. Men who chase perception age poorly. They become louder as they feel less certain. They interrupt to avoid being interrupted. They narrate their experience to ensure it is remembered. But the man who can walk away without explaining himself has crossed into a different psychological tier. He does not assume disrespect where none was intended. He does not compete with youth. He does not require applause. He understands that his credibility has already been established by decades of lived proof. And when genuine correction is required, he delivers it calmly, precisely, without emotional leakage. That distinction matters. Walking away is not abdication. It is discernment. And discernment is the final evolution of masculine strength. There is a quiet shift that happens when a man stops trying to manage how every room perceives him. He becomes harder to destabilize, harder to bait, harder to manipulate. Because manipulation depends on predictable reactions. When you are no longer predictable in your ego defense, you are free. Freedom at this age is not about mobility. It is about internal sovereignty. You choose where your energy goes. You choose which tensions deserve oxygen. You choose when explanation serves growth and when it merely feeds insecurity. And people feel that. They may not articulate it, but they adjust to it. Respect offered voluntarily carries more weight than respect demanded. So the next time you feel that tightening in your chest, that microsecond where your image feels threatened, pause. Let the silence stretch half a breath longer than comfort allows. Then decide, not from reflex, but from strength. Ask yourself, am I about to speak for truth or for ego? At 60, the men who master that distinction do not fade. They consolidate. They do not dominate rooms. They anchor them. And in a world that rewards noise, the man who can walk away without explaining himself carries a rare form of power. Not loud, not brittle, not defensive, just steady. And steady men shape legacies long after the conversation ends.